Hello, it's Carl Jensen from the Law Office of Carl Jensen in Great Falls, Montana. This video is intended for educational purposes only. It is not legal advice, and I'm not creating any kind of attorney-client relationship with this video. I'm not responsible for any actions taken based on the educational content of this video, and it's for education purposes only. If your particular situation, my advice to you is to contact an attorney before taking any kind of actions. So that said, I'm going to speak a little bit about the recreational marijuana laws in Montana, which passed in November of last year and are in place now. There's a lot still coming on it, but I get called probably 3 to 5 times a week by people wanting to set up a recreational marijuana business. So with that being said, let's talk a little bit about that. Right now, you are allowed to possess a recreational amount of marijuana in Montana. That's at the state level. It is not the federal level, so you need to be aware of that. And by recreational, it's a fairly small amount. You can still get charged. If you run around with like a hay bale worth of marijuana, you're going to get charged with possession with intent. It's a bunch of felonies. But for the most part, small amounts, usually in most areas, won't draw any attention. And the law enforcement just doesn't want to really probably bother with deciding whether you have a little too much. But still, I would advise you to stay within the legal limits. Don't be running around with it. Number 2 is, just so you're aware, you can be charged with the driving under the influence charge if you are using marijuana. I understand it stays in your system. Again, I know it's very common for people to partake of marijuana while sitting in their car with their little buddies. My advice to you is not to do that. Law enforcement can smell it. In marijuana, the THC stays in your bloodstream for a fair amount of time, even after you used it. And so if they smell it, they can start a DUI investigation. Maybe you haven't even used for a day. And then get a blood draw. Typically here in Great Falls and a lot of areas, they do blood draws, not breath tests, especially because of all the drug and marijuana use. And they'll send that to the toxicologist. And if you have THC in your system, and if you are a regular user, you will. You could be charged with DUI, and there's all sorts of presumptions about whether you're under the influence or not based on the level of THC even in your system. So my advice is not to be using your car as a location to imbibe. Anyway, following that, the other thing that gets people in trouble is that it's still a federal crime. You need to be aware of that. That means you can't be driving through. Number 1, there's a lot of reservations here in Montana. Reservations are actually a separate country from Montana itself, even though they're inside the borders. So some of them are, and some are partially in. And if you are there, the feds have jurisdiction over any kind of felony, and the tribes have jurisdiction over any kind of misdemeanor. And transporting it or delivering it or having it on your person can get you in trouble with the feds. Same with going to the military base, same with going to the airport, same with crossing the borders, same with going into Canada. All those places are places you can get in a lot of trouble, or coming back from Canada into Montana with marijuana. Even if it's a recreational and medicinal, you can get in trouble for it. Now, people call about wanting to set up businesses. The regulations won't be in place in Montana until October of this year. At the earliest, the Department of Public Health and Human Services is responsible for that, and they will be putting things in. And even when there are regulations, a lot of the cities and counties can zone the businesses out. Great Falls in particular did that. I know Kalispell did. You can't have any kind of, for the medical marijuana, I anticipate they'll do the same thing for the recreational marijuana. Sometimes people think that because of the nature of what it is, that zoning will be logical. In Cascade County, it's the heavy industrial areas, or at least it used to be, that could have a dispensary. or a grow operation for the medical marijuana. I anticipate it'll probably be similar with the recreational, which means not commercial areas, not residential, not agricultural areas, but specifically those locations. So be aware of that. If you're setting up a business, you need to check the zoning first and find out where that is, and be aware that the zoning can be changed. It probably will. They have the authority to do that, and to be very careful. The other issue you're going to probably end up running into is that most of the banks won't have anything to do with any kind of marijuana business because the federal regulations on it are a lot tighter. They have all sorts of reporting requirements. They can be fined for failing to do that or failing to report what appears to be criminal activity. And so things of that nature can be a problem. You're going to probably need an accountant as well. Your taxes are different at the federal level. You don't get the normal business deductions that another business would on your taxes. You're going to get zinged by the feds. You still have to pay taxes and income tax, but other than the costs of doing business, you're going to be restricted. So you probably need an accountant for that to look at what you can and cannot deduct. And be aware also, and again, we're talking about federal entanglements. A lot of these businesses deal with a lot of cash, and I remember when the medical marijuana boomed about 11 years ago when I was involved in it. You're a potential target for robberies because they know you can't have a firearm. You can get in a lot of trouble for having a firearm in a marijuana operation if you start a recreational or medical business in Montana. It's still illegal at the federal level, and you still cannot have a firearm while you're engaged in what the feds see as drug activity. You can end up doing several years in prison, and when I say several years, we're not talking probation, we're talking actual prison in a federal penitentiary. So you need to be aware of all that. The current administration seems to be a little more hostile towards marijuana. There's reports now that they've fired a bunch of White House staffers for past use of marijuana. So that's unfortunate, but you need to be aware of that, and you need to make sure that you're being extremely careful. If you have any other questions, feel free to call me. My number is 406-899-6696. That's here in Montana. Obviously, all this just applies to Montana, and it's for educational purposes. It is not applying to any other state's recreational marijuana laws. And good luck if you are planning on any kind of business regarding this. Thanks.